Captain Sarah Chen stood at the massive doors of the Grand Assembly Hall. The metal was unlike anything on Earth. It seemed to glow with its own light and felt warm to the touch. She took a deep breath and checked her uniform one last time. Today would decide if humanity got to join the war or stay hidden in their small corner of space. The doors opened with a soft hum. Inside the hall was bigger than any stadium Sarah had ever seen. Floating platforms held representatives from dozens of alien races. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that Sarah had to force herself not to stare. The Zephyrians sat on crystal thrones that floated in midair. Their bodies were made of what looked like living glass, and colors danced through them like rainbows. When they moved, they made soft chiming sounds that somehow formed words. Near them, the melody swayed gently on their platform. They had no mouths that Sarah could see, but their thoughts reached into her mind like whispers. It felt odd, like someone was speaking directly into her brain. The largest platform held the eternal winds. These beings looked like clouds given shape, constantly shifting and changing. Tiny lights sparkled within their gaseous bodies like stars in a nebula. At the center of it all sat the speaker, an ancient being whose species Sarah didn't recognize. Its voice boomed across the hall without any visible mouth moving. "The Assembly recognizes Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Republic," the speaker announced. Sarah walked to the center platform, feeling very small. Every alien eye, crystal, sensor, and consciousness focused on her. She had practiced this speech 100 times, but now her mouth felt dry. "Honored members of the Galactic Confederation," she began, "I come before you to offer humanity's help in the war against the Vorthak Empire." A sound rippled through the hall. It took Sarah a moment to realize it was laughter. Different species laughed in different ways. The Zephyrians chimed like broken bells, while the melody's amusement felt like tickles in her mind. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrians rose from his crystal throne. When he spoke, his voice was like music played on glass instruments. "Young Captain, your offer is touching, but perhaps you do not understand what you are asking." A hologram appeared in the center of the hall. It showed the Vorthak Empire, a vast network of conquered worlds marked in red. The red area was huge, covering nearly a quarter of the galaxy's spiral arm. "The Vorthak have been conquering worlds for over 10,000 of your years," Kethvar continued. "They are not like us. They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They are machines with one purpose: to convert all organic life into resources for their empire." Another hologram appeared, showing a Vorthak dreadnought. The ship was massive, covered in dark metal and bristling with weapons. It looked like a mechanical spider crossed with a warship. "Each of their dreadnoughts is the size of your largest cities," added Melody Representative Harmony, her thoughts flowing into everyone's minds. "Their fleets number in the thousands. They have destroyed civilizations that mastered space travel when your species was still discovering fire." Sarah felt her confidence wavering but forced herself to stand straight. "We know the odds are bad, but we can't just sit back and do nothing while they destroy everything." This brought more laughter from the assembly. A being that looked like a walking tree with too many arms spoke up. "Captain Chen, with respect, what could humanity possibly offer? You have been in space for less than 2 centuries. Most of us have been spacefaring for millennia." The speaker activated another hologram. This one showed humanity's military assets. Sarah's heart sank as she saw their fleet displayed for all to see. Compared to the alien ships around her, human vessels looked like toys. "The Terran Republic possesses 47 combat vessels," the speaker announced. "Their largest ship mass is 800,000 tons. Their weapons are fusion-based, with limited energy projection capability. Their fastest ships achieve 0.75 light speed." More laughter filled the hall. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she pressed on. "We may not have the biggest ships or the best weapons," she said, "but we have something else. We have the will to fight." "Will to fight?" The question came from a squid-like being whose skin constantly changed colors. "Captain, will does not stop plasma cannons. Determination does not penetrate force fields. The Vorthak have destroyed races with far more will than yours." Kethvar's crystal form flickered with what Sarah now recognized as amusement. "Tell me, Captain, what is humanity's greatest military achievement? What victory proves your species is ready for galactic warfare?" Sarah thought for a moment. How could she explain humanity's wars to beings who had never known scarcity, never fought for survival on a hostile world? "We survived," she said simply. Survived? The tree-like being's bark rustled with what might have been confusion. That is not a military achievement. On Earth, everything tried to kill us, Sarah explained. The weather, the animals, diseases, even other humans. We had to learn to fight just to stay alive. We've been at war for thousands of years, sometimes with each other, sometimes with nature itself. And this is supposed to impress us? The squid being's colors shifted to what Sarah guessed was skepticism. You fight among yourselves? This shows weakness, not strength. Sarah shook her head. It shows that we never give up. Every time we got knocked down, we got back up. Every time someone said something was impossible, we found a way to do it anyway. The Melody representative's thoughts touched Sarah's mind again, but this time they felt less amused and more curious. Your species has an interesting perspective on conflict, but perspective does not win wars against machines. The Vorthak calculate everything, added another being whose appearance Sarah couldn't quite focus on, as if it existed in several dimensions at once. They know the exact number of ships needed to conquer a system. They know how many casualties they will take. They have calculated our chances of victory. And what did they calculate? Sarah asked. 0%, the being replied. According to Vorthak projections, organic resistance will end within 50 of your years. A heavy silence fell over the assembly. Sarah realized that for all their advanced technology and ancient wisdom, these beings were afraid. They had been fighting a losing war against an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be negotiated with, and couldn't be stopped by conventional means. Maybe that's the problem, Sarah said quietly. You're fighting them like you'd fight each other. But the Vorthak aren't like you. They don't think like you. Maybe you need someone who doesn't fight fair. The laughter that followed was harder, more bitter. Captain Chen, Kethvar said, your enthusiasm is admirable, but naivety will not defeat the Vorthak Empire. We have tried every strategy, every tactic, every possible approach. Have you tried being unpredictable? Sarah asked. Unpredictable? The word seemed to confuse several species at once. Doing things that don't make sense. Fighting dirty. Taking risks that no sane person would take. The tree being's bark rustled again. Such tactics are uncivilized. Sarah almost smiled at that. Sometimes civilization is a luxury you can't afford. The speaker raised one of its many appendages for silence. The Assembly has heard the Terran Republic's request. We will now vote on whether to accept humanity into the Galactic Confederation's war effort. Sarah watched as lights appeared above each delegation's platform. She didn't need a translator to understand what she was seeing. Every single light was red, a unanimous rejection. The motion is defeated, the speaker announced. Captain Chen, while we appreciate humanity's offer, we cannot in good conscience send your people to die in a war they cannot possibly survive. Our advice is to focus on defending your own system. Build up your defenses. Perhaps in time, we'll all be dead. Sarah interrupted, earning shocked gasps from several delegations. Kethvar's crystal form flickered with what she now recognized as anger. Captain, you forget yourself. This assembly has seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. We have wisdom your species cannot comprehend. Sarah looked around the hall one last time. Maybe that's the problem, she said. You've gotten so wise that you've forgotten how to be desperate. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet hall. Behind her, she could hear the aliens beginning to talk among themselves, their voices mixing into a confused babble of sounds and mental whispers. As the massive doors closed behind her, Sarah pulled out her communicator. Admiral Torres, this is Captain Chen. The vote was unanimous against us. I figured as much, came the reply. What's our next move, Captain? Sarah looked back at the closed doors, then at the stars visible through the station's transparent walls. Somewhere out there, the Vorthak were advancing, conquering world after world while the galaxy's greatest civilizations debated and calculated their odds. We go anyway, she said. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Captain, that's direct disobedience of orders from the Galactic Confederation. Admiral, with respect, the Galactic Confederation just told us to sit in our corner and wait to die. I didn't become a soldier to wait for death. Another pause, then a chuckle. Neither did I, Captain. Neither did I. Come home. We have a war to prepare for. 6 months after the Galactic Assembly meeting, the emergency alarm screamed through the halls of the Confederation's command center. Ambassador Kethvar's crystal form flickered with stress patterns as he read the incoming reports. The news was worse than anyone had imagined. 3 systems in 1 week, he said to the assembled council members. His voice, usually like beautiful music, now sounded like breaking glass. Xerion Prime, the hegemony worlds, and New Zephyr, all gone. The holographic display in the center of the room showed the advancing red tide of Vorthak conquest. What had been a steady, predictable advance for decades had suddenly become a flood. Entire star systems that had held the line for years were falling in days. Melody Representative Harmony's thoughts touched everyone's minds, but instead of her usual calm wisdom, there was panic. The defensive line is broken. 27 years we held them back at the Kepler belt. Now they're through. The tree-like being from the Arbor Collective swayed nervously. Our projections showed at least 5 more years before they could break through our main defenses. How did they advance so quickly? Admiral Thexlon of the Four-Armed Hegemony stood at the tactical display. His species had been warriors for thousands of years, but even he looked shaken. They didn't just break through, he said. They adapted. Every strategy we used against them, every defensive position we thought was secure, they found ways around all of it. The display zoomed in on the latest battle reports. Vorthak dreadnoughts, each the size of a small moon, moved through space in perfect formations. Their dark hulls bristled with weapons that could crack planets. Behind them came the conversion ships, massive factory vessels that turned conquered worlds into resources for the Empire. Look at this, Thexelon continued, pointing to the battle recordings. At Xerion Prime, we used the spiral defense, a formation that has protected systems for over 1,000 years. The Vorthak machine studied it for exactly 17 minutes, then attacked from angles we didn't even know existed. The squid being's skin flashed through rapid color changes, the equivalent of nervous fidgeting. They're learning faster than we thought possible. Every battle teaches them something new about our tactics. Kethavar moved to another display showing casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. The Xerion Defense Fleet, 800 ships, 30 different species working together. They lasted 6 hours against a Vorthak force half their size. How is that possible? Asked a representative from the gas giant collective, her voice whistling through specialized breathing apparatus. Our ships have better shields, better weapons, better everything. Because they don't think like us, Harmony answered, her mental voice heavy with realization. We fight with honor, with established rules of engagement, with tactics that have worked for millennia. The Vorthak don't care about honor. They only care about efficiency. Admiral Thexelon activated another recording. It showed the final moments of a Confederation cruiser. The ship was beautiful. Sleek lines, elegant curves, designed as much for aesthetics as for war. The Vorthak ship that destroyed it looked like a mechanical nightmare. All angles and weapons and cold functionality. Watch this, Thexelon said grimly. The Confederation ship follows proper battle protocol. It announces itself, demands surrender, waits for a response. The Vorthak ship calculates the most efficient way to destroy it and opens fire immediately. But surely our technology is superior, protested the gas giant representative. We've had interstellar travel for thousands of years longer than them. Technology means nothing if you don't use it right, Thexelon replied. They're not trying to build beautiful ships or maintain their culture while fighting. They only want to win. The emergency alarm sounded again. A new report flashed on the main screen. The room fell silent as everyone read the words. Kepler Station under direct assault. Estimated time to fall 48 hours. Kepler Station was more than just a military outpost. It was a symbol. The last major stronghold between the Vorthak and the inner systems where most of the Confederation's civilian populations lived. If it fell, nothing stood between the machines and worlds holding billions of innocent lives. We have to evacuate, said the Arbor Collective representative, his bark creaking with age and worry. Pull back our remaining fleets, establish a new defensive line further in. Where? Kethavar asked bitterly. Every line we've drawn, they've broken through. Every position we've fortified, they've found a way around. How many more systems do we abandon? How many more billions do we leave to die? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. These beings had ruled space for millennia, had built civilizations that spanned star systems, had created wonders that defied imagination. Now they sat in their council chamber, afraid and running out of options. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Marcus Torres read the same reports in his office at Fleet Command. Unlike the Alien Council, he wasn't panicking. He was angry. 47 ships, he muttered, looking at humanity's complete naval roster displayed on his screen. 47 ships against an empire that just destroyed 800. His aide, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, stood nearby. "Sir, the math doesn't look good." Torres laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jackson, when has math ever looked good for humanity? We've been beating impossible odds since we figured out how to make fire." On the screen, reports continued to stream in from the front lines. The Vorthak weren't just winning, they were winning easily. Every conventional tactic the Confederation tried was met with perfect countermeasures. It was like watching chess masters try to play against a computer that could calculate every possible move. "Sir," Jackson said carefully, "the Galactic Confederation specifically told us to stay out of this war. If we deploy our fleet without authorization, they'll what? Kick us out of a club they wouldn't let us join in the first place?" Torres stood and walked to the window, looking out at the orbital shipyards where humanity's small fleet was docked. "Jackson, those alien councils spent 6 months laughing at us. They said we were too primitive, too weak, too stupid to help with their war. Maybe they were right, sir. Our weapons are centuries behind theirs. Our ships are smaller, slower." Torres turned back to his aide. "You know what those reports tell me, Jackson? They tell me that all their advanced technology and ancient wisdom isn't worth a damn against an enemy that doesn't play by their rules." He pulled up the tactical analyses of recent Vorthak victories. "Look at this. Every single battle, the aliens do exactly what the machines expect them to do. They follow proper military doctrine, they use established formations, they fight with honor. Isn't that how wars are supposed to be fought, sir? According to who? The same species that are losing every battle?" Torres shook his head. "Jackson, humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've fought when we were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. You know what we learned?" Jackson waited for the answer. "We learned that when you're fighting for survival, there's no such thing as fighting fair. Honor is a luxury for people who aren't about to die." Torres activated his communicator and opened a channel to Captain Chen, who was currently aboard the TRSS Defiance, humanity's newest and most advanced ship. It wasn't much compared to alien technology, but it was theirs. "Captain Chen, this is Admiral Torres. I need you in my office immediately." "On my way, sir." While waiting for Chen to arrive, Torres studied the reports from Kepler Station. The Vorthak had surrounded it with over 300 ships, including 3 of their massive World Killer-class dreadnoughts. The station's defenders were putting up a brave fight. But everyone knew how it would end. The aliens were evacuating. Again. Captain Chen arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing her flight suit from a training exercise. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Torres gestured to the tactical display. "What do you see when you look at this, Captain?" Chen studied the battle formation around Kepler Station. "I see a lot of big ships in a very organized formation, sir. And I see a formation that's designed to prevent escape, not to protect itself." Chen looked closer. "Those dreadnoughts are positioned to create overlapping fields of fire on any ship trying to leave the system. But that positioning leaves them vulnerable to attack from specific angles." Torres smiled for the first time in days. "Exactly what I was thinking. The aliens see an overwhelming force. We see a tactical opportunity. Sir, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "Captain, I'm ordering our entire fleet to deploy immediately." "Destination Kepler Station," Jackson stepped forward. "Admiral, that's direct violation of Confederation orders. They specifically told us to stay out of this war." "No, Jackson, they told us we weren't good enough to help. There's a difference." Torres looked back at Chen. "Captain, how long to get our fleet ready for combat?" 6 hours for full deployment, sir. "But Admiral, even if we leave immediately, it'll take us 3 days to reach Kepler Station. The battle will be over by then." "Maybe. Or maybe we'll arrive just in time to show the galaxy what humans do when everyone else gives up." Torres walked back to his window, looking out at Earth's blue skies. Somewhere out there beyond the stars, an ancient enemy was winning a war by being completely ruthless. The TRSS Defiance moved through space like a ghost, its hull darkened and engines running silent. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching the scanner displays with the patience of a hunter. Around her, the small human fleet had spread out across 3 star systems, moving through Vorthak-controlled space like wolves in the night. "Contact," whispered Ensign Martinez from the sensor station. "Vorthak patrol bearing 27 Mark IV. 3 ships, cruiser class." Chen studied the enemy formation on her screen. The Vorthak ships moved in perfect triangular formation, their dark hulls bristling with sensors that swept space in regular patterns. They were hunting for the human fleet, following the same systematic search protocols they had used for thousands of years. "They're following standard patrol doctrine," observed Commander Hayes, Chen's first officer. "Predictable search grid, predetermined routes." "Just like the intelligence report said," Chen nodded. The aliens had been right about one thing. The Vorthak were predictable. But they had been wrong about something else. They thought predictability made the enemy stronger. Chen knew it made them vulnerable. "Signal the Yorktown and the Midway," she ordered quietly. "Tell them to hold position behind those asteroids. We're going to show these machines something they've never seen before." The Defiance powered up its engines and moved directly toward the Vorthak patrol. On any other ship, this would be considered suicide. 3 human vessels against 3 Vorthak cruisers should have been an easy victory for the machines. The Vorthak had superior shields, better weapons, and armor that could withstand anything in humanity's arsenal. But Chen wasn't planning to fight fair. "Range 15,000 kilometers and closing," Martinez reported. "They've detected us, Captain. All 3 ships are changing course to intercept." "Perfect," Chen said with a smile that would have made her enemies nervous. "Are they following standard engagement protocol?" "Yes, ma'am. They're moving into attack formation Alpha 7, just like the manual says they should." Chen had studied every piece of intelligence humanity had gathered about the Vorthak. They were machines, which meant they followed programmed responses. When faced with a smaller force, they always used the same tactics because those tactics always worked. Against civilized enemies who fought with honor and followed the rules, the Vorthak protocols were perfect. Humans didn't follow the rules. "Helm, take us directly at the lead ship." "Full speed, Captain." The helmsman's voice cracked slightly. "That's a ramming course. I know exactly what it is. Execute." The Defiance leaped forward like a missile, accelerating toward the lead Vorthak ship at maximum burn. On the enemy vessels, computers calculated the human ship's course and determined it was a suicide attack, an inefficient use of resources that would accomplish nothing. They were wrong. At 5,000 kilometers, when the Vorthak began to fire, Chen gave her next order. "Emergency stop. Full reverse thrust. Deploy chaff and electronic countermeasures." The Defiance seemed to slam into an invisible wall as its engines fired at maximum power in the opposite direction. The sudden deceleration threw everyone on the bridge forward against their restraints, but it also did something the Vorthak computers hadn't expected. It made the human ship disappear from their targeting sensors. Clouds of metallic chaff filled the space around the Defiance, creating false targets and jamming enemy sensors. Electronic warfare systems that humanity had developed for fighting other humans confused the Vorthak targeting computers. For 30 crucial seconds, the machines couldn't tell where the real ship was. That was all Chen needed. Launch missiles, all tubes. Target the lead ship's engine section. Humanity's missiles weren't as advanced as alien weapons, but they had one advantage. They were designed by a species that had spent centuries trying to kill each other. Human weapons were built to be sneaky, to find weaknesses, to do maximum damage with minimum resources. The missiles streaked through the chaff cloud. Their guidance systems locked onto the heat signature of the Vorthak ship's engines. The enemy's point defense systems fired frantically, but they were calibrated for standard missile attacks, not for weapons that twisted and danced through space like living things. 7 of the 12 missiles found their target. The explosions tore through the Vorthak cruiser's engine section, sending chunks of dark metal spinning through space. The ship didn't die, its armor was too strong for that, but it was crippled. Its main engines dark and its weapon system cycling offline for emergency repairs. "Now signal the Yorktown and Midway," Chen ordered. "Tell them to light up the other 2 ships. Full spread everything we have." The 2 human ships emerged from the asteroid field like predators from ambush. Their missile launchers fired in rapid sequence, filling space with dozens of warheads. The remaining Vorthak ships, still trying to locate the Defiance through the sensor jamming, suddenly found themselves under attack from 2 different directions. The machines tried to adapt, their computers calculating new target priorities and defensive positions. But human tactics didn't follow any programming they understood. The missiles came in waves, some direct, some looping around asteroids, some designed to explode and create more chaff clouds. "The second ship is taking heavy damage," reported Martinez. "Their shields are fluctuating. Keep hitting them. Don't give them time to adapt." This was the key difference between human and alien tactics. The Confederation species fought with precision and efficiency, giving their enemies time to respond and counterattack. Humans fought with chaos and overwhelming aggression, hitting hard and fast and never letting up. The second Vorthak ship's shields collapsed under the sustained bombardment. Human missiles designed to penetrate Earth's most advanced defenses tore through the enemy hull like it was made of paper. Secondary explosions rippled along the ship's length as its ammunition stores detonated. The third Vorthak ship, calculating that it was outnumbered and taking significant damage, did what its programming told it to do. It began to retreat, sending a distress signal to alert other Vorthak forces. Chen couldn't let that happen. Helm, intercept course on the retreating ship. Maximum burn. Captain, we're already at the edge of structural limits. If we push harder, then we push harder anyway. We can't let them report our position. The Defiant screamed through space, its engines running far beyond safe parameters. In the engine room, Chief Engineer O'Connor watched his readouts with the calm of a man who had pushed machines beyond their limits for his entire career. She'll hold together. Captain, he reported over the intercom. She might not be pretty when we're done, but she'll hold. The chase lasted 18 minutes. The Vorthak ship was faster in a straight line, but the human vessel was more maneuverable. When the enemy tried to change course, Chen was already there, cutting off escape routes with the instinct of a fighter pilot. Firing range, Martinez announced. Target their communications array. Everything we have. The last salvo of missiles struck the Vorthak ship's sensor and communication equipment, leaving it blind and deaf. Without being able to call for help or coordinate with other units, the ship became just another piece of debris floating in space. In the aftermath, as the human fleet regrouped among the asteroids, Chen reviewed the battle reports. 3 Vorthak cruisers destroyed or disabled. 0 human casualties. It should have been impossible. Captain, Commander Hayes said quietly. They're going to adapt to our tactics. The Vorthak will study this battle and find ways to counter everything we just did. Chen nodded. I'm counting on it. Hayes looked confused. Ma'am? Think about it, Commander. They're machines. They learn from patterns, from repeated data. But what if we never give them the same pattern twice? She pulled up a star chart showing their route to Kepler Station. Between them and their destination were 2 more Vorthak-controlled systems, each with patrol fleets and automated defense platforms. The aliens fight the same way every time because their tactics work. Chen continued. The Vorthak counter those tactics because they're predictable. But humans, we've never met a rule we wouldn't break if it helped us win. Over the next 2 days, the human fleet proved Chen's point. When they encountered a Vorthak patrol in the second system, they didn't attack directly. Instead, they used the system's asteroid belt to create a chain reaction of collisions, turning the space around the enemy ships into a shooting gallery of high-velocity rocks. In the third system, they faced automated defense platforms that should have been impregnable. Instead of attacking the platforms directly, the humans hacked into the system's civilian communication network and used it to broadcast false targeting data, making the platforms fire on each other. Each engagement was different. Each victory came from tactics no civilized species would consider. The humans fought like pirates, like guerrillas, like desperate survivors who had nothing left to lose. News of their impossible victories began to spread through Confederation space, carried by automated monitoring stations and civilian ships. The reports were fragmentary and confused, but the message was clear somehow. Impossibly, the tiny human fleet was winning battles they should have lost. On the command ship of the Confederation's main fleet, Admiral Thexlon read the reports with growing amazement. They destroyed an entire patrol squadron with 47 missiles, he said to his staff. Kepler Station hung in space like a dying star, its metal hull scarred by days of continuous bombardment. The massive structure had once been a symbol of Confederation power, a fortress that protected the inner systems from invasion. Now it was surrounded by a nightmare of enemy ships, their dark hulls reflecting no light as they closed in for the kill. Admiral Thexlon stood in the station's command center, his forearms working frantically at different control panels. Around him, officers from a dozen species worked to coordinate the evacuation of the last civilian transports. The defense fleet that had once numbered over 200 ships was down to 47 battered survivors. Another transport away, reported his communications officer, a crystalline being whose faceted form was cracked with stress fractures. That's the last of the civilians. Thexlon nodded grimly. What's our defensive status? Shield generators are at 15%. Weapons platforms 7 through 12 are offline. We have maybe 6 hours before complete structural failure. Through the command center's massive windows, Thexalon could see the Vorthak fleet in all its terrible glory. 3 World Killer-class dreadnoughts formed the center of their formation, each one longer than the station itself. Around them, hundreds of smaller ships moved in perfect coordination, like parts of a vast machine designed for destruction. "Sir," called his sensor operator, "I'm detecting new contacts on the outer edge of the system. Small ships moving fast." Thexalon moved to the sensor station, hoping against hope that Confederation reinforcements had arrived. What he saw on the display made his heart sink. 4 small ships barely registering on the sensors. Their design was unfamiliar, primitive-looking compared to modern warships. "Human vessels," the sensor operator confirmed. "It's the fleet that's been causing trouble in Vorthak space." For a moment, Thexalon felt a flicker of hope. Then reality set in. 4 ships against a fleet of 300. It wasn't rescue. It was 4 more pointless deaths. His communications officer looked up. "Sir, the lead human ship is hailing us." "Put them through." The face that appeared on the main screen was young for a species with such short lifespans. Captain Sarah Chen looked tired but determined, her eyes bright with the kind of intensity Thexalon had seen in warriors facing impossible odds. "Admiral Thexalon, this is Captain Chen of the TRSS Defiance. We're here to assist." Despite everything, Thexalon couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and pity for the young human. "Captain Chen, I appreciate the gesture, but you need to retreat immediately. This position is lost. We're conducting a strategic withdrawal." "Negative, Admiral. We're not here to retreat." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around the command center, alien officers stopped what they were doing to stare at the screen. A few made sounds that might have been laughter in their species, but it was nervous, uncertain laughter. "Captain," Thexalon said gently, "I understand your species' reputation for optimism, but there are over 300 enemy ships out there, including 3 world killers. Your entire fleet consists of 4 small vessels." "I can count, Admiral. The question is, are you going to help us or just watch?" Thexalon felt all 4 of his heart skip a beat. "Help you do what?" "Win this battle." The laughter that followed was louder this time, echoing through the command center as officers from multiple species reacted to what they perceived as human madness. But Thexalon wasn't laughing. He had read the intelligence reports about the human fleet's journey through Vorthak space, impossible victories against superior forces, tactics that made no sense but somehow worked. "What do you need from us?" he asked quietly. The laughter stopped. Every being in the command center turned to stare at their admiral in shock. "I need you to keep your remaining ships exactly where they are," Chen replied. "Whatever happens, don't move to help us. Don't try to assist. Just stay put and be ready to move when I give the signal." "Captain, that makes no tactical sense. If we coordinate our attack..." "Admiral, with respect, your tactics got you surrounded and outnumbered. Let us try something different." Before Thexalon could respond, the communication channel closed. On the sensor display, he watched as the 4 human ships changed course, heading directly toward the center of the Vorthak formation. "They're moving toward the world killers," his tactical officer reported, her voice filled with disbelief. "Direct approach, no attempt at stealth." Thexalon studied the enemy formation more carefully. The 3 massive dreadnoughts sat at the center like spiders in a web, their weapon systems trained on the station. Around them, the smaller Vorthak ships formed layers of protection, creating overlapping fields of fire that should make any direct attack impossible. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving tactical data from the human ships. They're sharing their sensor readings with us." A new display appeared showing the Vorthak formation from the human perspective. At first, Thexalon saw the same impenetrable defensive grid that had kept them trapped for days. Then his tactical computer began highlighting details he had missed. The positioning of the world killers wasn't just defensive. It was designed to prevent the station from escaping. The massive ships were oriented to create killing fields around all possible evacuation routes. But that same positioning left gaps in their mutual protection, blind spots where their overlapping weapons couldn't cover each other. "Impossible," whispered his tactical officer. "Those gaps are too small. No ship could navigate through them, especially not under fire." "No sane ship," Thexalon corrected quietly. On the display, The human vessels had spread out into a diamond formation, with the Defiance taking point. They were moving fast, faster than should be safe in such a crowded battlefield. Their course would take them through the outer perimeter of Vorthak ships, directly into the teeth of the enemy formation. "The Vorthak are responding," reported the sensor operator. "All ships moving to intercept. They're treating this as a standard attack formation." Thexalon watched as hundreds of enemy ships began to converge on the 4 human vessels. It should have been like watching gnats fly into a bonfire. The humans were outnumbered 75-1. Their ships were smaller, their weapons weaker, their armor thinner. But something was wrong with the picture. The Vorthak ships were moving in perfect coordination, following established patterns that had served them well for thousands of years. They were responding to the human attack exactly, as their programming dictated they should exactly, as the humans were counting on them to respond. The first exchange of fire lit up space, like a miniature star going nova. Vorthak energy beams lanced out toward the human ships, enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. But the human vessels weren't where the targeting computers expected them to be. At the last second, all 4 ships executed maneuvers that should have torn them apart. They twisted, rolled, and dove through space with the desperate agility of fighters fleeing for their lives. Except they weren't fleeing. They were advancing, using the Vorthak's own formation against them. "How are they doing that?" the tactical officer breathed. Thexalon was beginning to understand. "They're using the enemy ships as cover. Every time the Vorthak try to target them, there's another Vorthak ship in the way." It was insane. The humans were flying through the enemy formation like it was an obstacle course, using the Vorthak's perfect coordination as a weakness. When one group of ships moved to attack, the humans were already behind another group. When defensive systems tried to lock on, the humans used friendly fire protocols to make the Vorthak hesitate. "They're not trying to destroy the entire fleet," Thexalon realized. "They're going for the world killers." The realization hit him like a physical blow. While everyone else saw an impossible battle against overwhelming odds, the humans had identified the real target. The world killers were command ships. Destroy them and the rest of the fleet would lose coordination. But getting close to them meant flying through the most heavily defended space in the galaxy. "Signal all our ships," Thexalon ordered. "Prepare for emergency acceleration. I think I know what they're planning." On his screen, he watched the Defiance break away from the other 3 human ships. While her escorts engaged the outer ring of defenders, drawing fire and attention, Chen's ship dove toward the largest world killer like a missile seeking its target. The massive Dreadnought's point defense systems came online, filling space around it with a storm of energy and metal. No ship should have been able to survive in that killing field. The Defiance flew through it anyway, her hull glowing red from near misses, her shields failing and reforming in rapid succession. "They're going to ram it," someone whispered. But ramming wasn't Chen's plan. As the Defiance closed to point-blank range, Thexalon saw something that made his tactical brain reel. The human ship wasn't heading for the world killer's hull. It was flying directly toward the massive vessel's main reactor core, exposed for just seconds during the weapon charging cycle. It was the kind of shot that existed only in theory, the sort of impossible precision that battle computers dismissed as statistically irrelevant. You would need perfect timing, insane flying skills, and the willingness to risk everything on a single moment. The Grand Assembly Hall looked different this time. The same floating platforms held the same alien representatives, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where once there had been laughter and dismissive amusement, now there was respectful silence. Where once there had been condescending smiles, now there were serious faces filled with hope and uncertainty. Captain Sarah Chen stood once again at the center of the hall, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Admiral Thexalon, his forearms folded in a gesture of respect. Beside him were representatives from every species that had survived the Battle of Kepler Station. They had come not to vote on humanity's request to join the war, but to formally ask humans to lead it. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrians spoke first, his crystal form flickering with colors Chen had learned to recognize as embarrassment. "Captain Chen, 6 months ago, this assembly made a grave error in judgment. We evaluated your species based on conventional, military metrics and found you lacking." A ripple of uncomfortable sounds passed through the hall, the alien equivalent of nervous coughing. "Failed to consider that conventional metrics might not apply to unconventional warfare," Kethvar continued. Your victory at Kepler Station has forced us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about combat. Chen nodded politely but said nothing. She had learned that silence could be as powerful as words when dealing with beings who were used to having all the answers. Melody Representative Harmony's thoughts touched everyone's minds, but her mental voice was different now, humbler, uncertain. We have studied the tactical recordings of your battle. Our computers cannot explain how you achieved victory against such overwhelming odds. That's because you're still thinking like machines, Chen replied quietly. You're looking for formulas and predictable patterns. Human warfare isn't about following patterns, it's about breaking them. The tree-like being from the Arbor Collective swayed nervously. But surely there must be some underlying strategy, some logical framework that explains your success. Chen smiled, remembering her conversation with Admiral Torres before the mission. The framework is simple. When you're fighting for your life, there are no rules except survival. Everything else is just details. She activated a holographic display showing the current state of the war. The Vorthak Empire still controlled vast sections of space, their red territory spreading across the galaxy like a cancer. But for the first time in decades, that advance had stopped. More than stopped. In several systems, it had actually been reversed. After Kepler Station, word spread through both our fleets and theirs. Chen continued. The Vorthak had never lost a major engagement before. Their programming didn't know how to handle defeat. While they were trying to calculate what went wrong, our combined forces hit 3 more systems. The display zoomed in on recent battle sites. Each one showed the same pattern. Small human fleets working with larger alien forces, achieving impossible victories through tactics that made no logical sense. At Proxima 7, we convinced the Vorthak that our main fleet was retreating, then used that retreat to lead them into a gravity well that crushed half their ships, Chen explained. At New Terra, we hacked their communication systems and made them think they were fighting each other. At the Helix Nebula, we triggered a stellar flare that knocked out their electronics. Admiral Thexelon stepped forward. Each engagement taught us something new about fighting an enemy that thinks it has calculated every possible outcome. The key is to do things that cannot be calculated. The squid being's colors shifted through patterns Chen now recognized as confusion. But how can we replicate these tactics? How can we teach our commanders to think illogically? You can't, Chen said bluntly. That's not how your species evolved. You've spent thousands of years perfecting the art of civilized warfare. You fight with honor, with established protocols, with strategies that minimize casualties and preserve valuable resources. She paused, looking around the hall at faces that represented millions of years of accumulated wisdom and culture. But humans evolved differently. We spent thousands of years fighting for scraps on a hostile world. We learned to be desperate, to take risks that no sane being would consider, to fight dirty when fighting clean meant dying. You can't teach that, you either have it or you don't. The silence that followed was broken by the speaker, the ancient being whose species Chen still couldn't identify. Then what do you propose, Captain Chen? How do we proceed? Chen had been dreading this question because she knew her answer would change everything, not just the war, but the relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. We propose joint command, she said finally. Human tactical commanders working with alien strategic planners. Your species provide the ships, the technology, the resources. Ours provide the creativity. And after the war? Asked Kethvar. What happens when the Vorthak are defeated? It was a good question, and Chen had spent many sleepless nights thinking about it. Humanity was about to become the galaxy's military leaders by default, not because they were the strongest or most advanced, but because they were the most willing to do terrible things to win. After the war, we go home, she said simply. Earth never asked to rule the galaxy. We just want to survive in it. The gas giant representative's voice whistled through her breathing apparatus. But surely humanity deserves some form of recognition for their sacrifices. Territory, resources, representation in the Confederation leadership? Chen shook her head. We don't want to rule you. We want to fight alongside you. There's a difference. It was a distinction that most of the assembled beings didn't quite understand. Their own histories were filled with conquest and expansion, with stronger species dominating weaker ones. The idea of a military power that didn't want political control was almost incomprehensible. But that was exactly what made humans, dangerous to the Vorthak and valuable to everyone else. Very. Well, the speaker announced. The Galactic Confederation formally requests that humanity assume tactical command of our combined military forces. All in favor? This time the lights above each platform glowed green. Not a single red vote appeared. Chen felt a weight settle on her shoulders that had nothing to do with gravity. Billions of lives across hundreds of worlds were now depending on humanity's ability to do the impossible, again and again until either the Vorthak were defeated or there was nothing left to defend. "Thank you for your trust," she said quietly. "We won't let you down." As the assembly began to disperse, Admiral Thexlon approached Chen. His expression was thoughtful, almost worried. "Captain, may I ask you something in private?" Chen nodded, and they moved to an observation deck overlooking the space around the station. Through the transparent aluminum, they could see the combined fleet, human ships dwarfed by their alien counterparts, but somehow looking more dangerous despite their smaller size. "At Kepler Station," Thexlon said quietly, "when you flew the Defiance directly at that world killer, you knew it was a suicide mission, didn't you?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Every mission is a suicide mission if you think about it too hard. The trick is not thinking about it. But you were prepared to die. Your entire crew was prepared to die. For a station full of people you'd never met, defending worlds you'd never seen." "Yes." "Why?" It was such a simple question, but Chen found it hard to answer. How do you explain to an ancient, wise species that some things are worth dying for? How do you make beings who calculate every risk understand the value of risking everything? "Because someone had to," she said finally. "Because if we didn't try, who would? Because the alternative to fighting impossible odds is accepting certain defeat." Thexlon was quiet for several minutes, watching the human ships prepare for their next mission. "I'm beginning to understand why the Vorthak never calculated humanity as a threat," he said. "Your entire species is tactically insane," Chen laughed. "Admiral, you say that like it's a bad thing." "On the contrary, Captain. I'm beginning to think tactical insanity might be exactly what this galaxy needs." 3 days later, the combined fleet departed for the Vorthak home system. The odds were still terrible. One human strategist had calculated their chances of success at less than 3%. But as the ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying warriors from dozens of species united under human command, no one was laughing at those odds anymore. In the forward observation lounge of the TRSS Defiance, Captain Chen looked out at the stars rushing past. Somewhere ahead lay the heart of an empire that had conquered a quarter of the galaxy, defended by fleets that had never known defeat. She smiled grimly. The Vorthak had calculated the odds of organic resistance succeeding. They had determined that conventional military tactics would fail against their superior forces. They had programmed their entire war machine based on the assumption that their enemies would fight rationally. They were about to learn something that every human child knew by instinct. Sometimes the best way to win an impossible fight is to be too stupid to know it's impossible. The war was far from over. The hardest battle still lay ahead. But for the first time since the Vorthak Empire began its expansion, the machines were no longer certain of victory. And uncertainty, Chen knew, was the first step toward defeat.